Greetings everyone! Today we are proud to present our latest school magazine which is a collaboration between ADA and TISA students. Today, together we will bring diverse voices, creative ideas and also shared perspectives from both communities. We hope that it will inspire us for more cooperation, creativity and collaboration between ADA and TISA students in the future.
Okay, so I think it's better we proceed with the interview. So your name is?
Safiya Hackett.
Safiya Hackett. Okay, it's very nice to meet you. I'm Maryam Musayeva. And how are you feeling today?
Pretty good. I had a free day, so.
Yeah, I'm glad. So let's go to the questions. Let's not waste any time. So how did you end up in Azerbaijan?
So my father works for the United States government. He works for the State Department. That means that he performs diplomacy. Currently he runs public affairs, which means educational systems and other kinds of work like that. So I've lived in 6 different countries because of this work. Recently, now Azerbaijan as of 3 months. And so far, it's been pretty good.
I'm glad it was. Can you tell me more about the other countries that you've lived in?
The first, I've lived in Russia, Ukraine, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the US, Canada, as well as here now.
Okay. So what was the biggest challenge of frequently changing environments and how did you adapt to it?
I think the most difficult was the social aspect. I would have to make quick connections with people and I became very good at adapting to new situations because of it. However, it did make it difficult to get to know people and become closer with them.
Have you ever faced any bullying due to these circumstances?
Yes, I have. It was in the United States where I was living in this very rural community where a lot of people act like it is the 17th century. They do not ride in cars or anything of that particular sort, and I was incredibly different from them because I had recently moved from Ukraine. So my difference in experience resulted in a bit of bullying due to the fact that I was quite a bit different from them.
I'm sorry that happened to you, and I'm sure many people face these kind of problems as well. Is there any advice that you could give to teenagers or maybe kids that face bullying as well?
I think that for one, you need to ensure that you have a support system, especially if you go to a decent school. You need to make sure that you have good contacts with the administration of the school so that you can address these situations. As well as you need to make sure that you latch on to people who do accept you for who you are, depending on exactly the situation that you are in. There is going to be someone at every single school. It just may take some time.
Thank you. So my next question is, how does living in Azerbaijan compare to the other places that you've lived in?
It's very different, not just in terms of food-wise or even weather. The culture is vastly different than what I am used to. There's also, I have found, significantly less English, which I found incredibly interesting. But I do not speak almost any Russian, and I speak no Azerbaijani, unfortunately. I find that that makes it a bit difficult at times, but I've been adapting and trying to find different ways to connect with communities. And I feel like that's really helped me become more connected with the culture. And I haven't known much about this part of the world. So I was really interested when I came here looking into all the cultural sites, really.
So you mentioned that the history of Azerbaijan is very interesting to you. Do you find it hard to study? Like, is it any harder than, for example, the history of Ukraine or the Republic of Congo, any other countries?
What I specialize in is Western Europe in terms of history. I don't find it more difficult. I find it difficult in any way because I don't know enough about it. And that is why I spend a lot of time going to cultural sites and trying to learn as much about the history throughout the ages of Azerbaijan, because this is the place I'm living in, and I find it really important to know more about the culture if I'm really going to have a good experience here.
Thank you. So, as far as I know, you study at TISA. What do you enjoy the most about studying at TISA, and how does it differ from other schools that you've attended?
It's a very small school in terms of ones that I've been to, and it has a good community, is what I've found so far. And for the size of the school, it has a lot of opportunities. I find that really wonderful because I have a tendency to take up a lot of activities, for better or for worse. And in this case, I found that really important to have those kind of opportunities given to me through the school that I was going to.
So you mentioned taking up a lot of extracurricular activities. So my question is, how do you balance both academics and extracurricular activities with the all of the moving between the countries?
I balance it with doing the IB diploma program currently. I'm in DP, and I mean, recently I just had so many summatives. But I find that currently I'm going to first go with balancing it here in Azerbaijan, and then I'll move on to how I balance it during the moving process. For my extracurriculars here in Azerbaijan, I balance it with my academics by ensuring that I have a list of priorities. There are certain things that I prioritize in academics and that I find to be important. Academics is what I do whenever I have any time. My extracurriculars, I have set times to do them. I make sure that I have a structure for those particular activities. I ensure that I have time to study, and that in that case, I end up still being able to manage all the activities that I do. However, while moving in the United States, I picked up a few specific hobbies, such as fencing. And in this case, I ensured that before I came, I did extensive research on what opportunities I would have in the fields that I'm most interested in whenever I go to a new place. So during that moving process, I spend that time when I'm traveling, ensuring that I know exactly what I want to do, making sure I take steps even before I arrive to make it happen.
So you've mentioned that you usually have a plan for the day. So what do you do on the days where you don't feel like doing anything, when you're dismotivated, you feel bad, you feel sick?
Yeah.
How do you overcome it?
I have a specific idea of what I'm going to do on those particular days. On those days, I do not feel like doing any studying, such as today. I don't really feel like going out or anything in particular. And in that case, I will oftentimes instead prioritize doing something of interest to me, such as maybe even practicing for the musical, or spending time with my family, or even just spending time on my own, doing something that I enjoy, watching a TV show. But I will still make sure that I set a specific time if I need to get something done. If I have an exam the next day, I'm going to set aside an hour to study, but then I'm going to leave myself at just that hour. I'm not going to make myself study more than I have to, or it's not going to be really a good day.
I like the dedication. So outside the classroom, you've mentioned that you engage in a lot of extracurriculars, such as fencing. What are the other extracurriculars that you do?
So I'm going to be running a public speaking club for virtual American spaces. In addition, I also do speech and debate. I work with ADA here. I also do the school musical. I do singing lessons, personal training, as well as I run social media for a nonprofit organization. And furthermore, I mean, of course, I do fencing. I fence in the same club as the national team of Azerbaijan. They are terrifying. And currently, I also am working on a few other small projects in addition to those, such as being a student class representative for my grade.
That's really nice. So you've mentioned debates.
Yes.
And that your father works in the government, so I'm guessing you've attended MUNs. Are you
I
familiar?
haven't actually. I'm aware of MUN and I plan to do it next year. But because MUN conflicted with speech and debate, and therefore I decided that I was going to prioritize doing speech and debate this year and do MUN next year so I could balance it out.
Okay, that's really nice. So about the whole plan for the day and free time situation. I think it's not a secret that most students tend to spend their free time using social media these days. What is your stance on this? Like, do you use it a lot, and do you think social media these days affects students' performances?
I certainly use social media. I'm on Instagram and Snapchat and YouTube and plenty of different social medias, but I do try to limit my time on it. Not to like an extensive degree. I don't have like a set time that I'm going to turn it off. It's not my top priority. And I believe that it can inhibit performances if it is used to an extreme amount. But I find that many students, as long as they have interest in the things that they are doing, social media will not end up being the thing that they spend their entire life doing. And as long as that's the case, I feel like that is an okay thing for students to do.
Thank you for your answer. If you could give one piece of advice to students who struggle with adapting to new places, what would it be?
I think it's to try to make as many connections as possible. If when you are adapting to a new place, half the time when you first arrive, you don't really want to do anything, I think that that's something that you should try to avoid doing. As soon as you arrive, try to find something, anything in the area that you think may interest you. For example, when I first arrived, it was looking at all of the different activities that I could do potentially. I arrived in the middle of summer, and going to cultural sites, which is how I decided to get adapted to the area. But if students decide to wait when they first arrive to a new place, it can be much more difficult to adapt if you don't have an outlet as soon as you arrive.
So, with all of these activities throughout the day and socializing with people, do you not get overstimulated? Like, how do you deal with the mental health part?
Mental health part, I find that it is important to take breaks and relax. Unfortunately, I am very poor at this. However, I find that my friends and family are my top priority. Above any of my academics or activities, they are what I care about most. So if I am feeling overstimulated or upset, I find that I will often spend that time with them. And I will use them as an outlet, and oftentimes, especially if I'm helping them with something, I feel a lot better and I'm able to calm down from what I'm feeling overstimulated about.
Yeah, I'm really glad. Thank you for answering my questions. I think we should proceed with the public's questions. If anybody is curious about anything, feel free to ask the questions.
Firstly, thank you for joining this interview, giving this interview. And I had a question like, what was your first impression when you came into Azerbaijan, into Baku, about like city, about people?
So that's a very good question. When I first arrived, it was in early July this year. Well, first I thought it was incredibly hot, and after which I was first exploring the city, and I was very impressed by the architecture and the old town. I'm gonna mispronounce this, but Cherishahir. Thank you. I thought was so interesting. The architecture, the style, and it was very different than even in other areas of Eastern Europe and in Western Europe that I had visited. I just found it incredibly fascinating. In terms of people, I really did not meet much of anybody besides people related directly to the US Embassy until I began fencing about a week later. And that was a very interesting experience because none of them spoke any English. So my experience was mostly them pointing of where to stand, and then they would fight me. It was a very interesting experience, but I really wasn't able to meet many people until school began.
Did you ever struggle with language barrier, not understanding what other people are saying? Did it ever frustrate you to not be able to communicate in the same language?
I did, multiple times. In the US, of course, it wasn't much of an issue, except a few times with Spanish, which is why I ended up learning Spanish in the future. In Quebec, I went to a completely French school. And in that case, Quebec is in Canada, I decided to just learn French. I was quite young, so I decided to just completely learn the language, and I did. I'm quite fluent now. However, in the other countries that I have lived, in Ukraine and Russia, I did not learn almost any Russian or Ukrainian. For Kinshasa, however, I knew some French for Kinshasa, which was the primary language.
You said that you visited different countries like Russia and Ukraine. What difficulties did you face there while living in these countries?
In Russia, I was quite young, which perhaps made it a bit more difficult. A lot of my memories from there revolved around the police or the military during my time in Russia. Any big memories that I have either revolve around protection from the Marines or things that I saw. Kinshasa was actually probably the most dangerous where I was at the time. I was in Russia in about 2013, so I do remember quite a bit of it. However, in Kinshasa, I was there doing it during an Ebola pandemic. And there was a lot of issues going on in terms of security. I oftentimes had to have security with me. For Ukraine, however, it was quite safe. We were there right before the war. And I found it to be overall a safe experience. However, there were, of course, times when certain things that I saw in the news occurred, and then I would feel unsafe even walking around the streets. But this did not happen all that often in comparison to in the DRC or in Russia.
In which country your adaptation was easier, and which of these countries attracted you most?
So my adaptation was the easiest. Likely, I want to say in Ukraine, it was likely the easiest because at that point I had already been traveling every 2 years consistently. And I believe my most difficult one would have been actually in the US. Going back to the US, I experienced what is called reverse culture shock. Because I had been traveling to different countries every 2 years, going to the United States and living in rural Pennsylvania was a very interesting experience, and I didn't quite know how to react to it. And I believe that that was probably my most difficult adaptation to a new environment. While what attracted my interest the most was likely I was very excited to come to Azerbaijan, actually. I had not been, like I've said, I have not been very much to this part of the world, and I was really excited to go back to the Eurasia area because I was getting a little tired of the United States. I had been there for 5 years, and I was about ready to move to a new place.
I also heard that math in America is much more easier than in Azerbaijan. Is it true? Did you face some difficulties with math in Azerbaijan?
If I am being honest, my mathematics class last year was actually quite difficult. The school that I was going to was a public school in Virginia. The mathematics at that school is very good. I did well. However, I did find it to be difficult and a good challenge. In comparison to here in Azerbaijan, I am taking an IB diploma mathematics. So far, I have found it to be things that I have already learned in the United States, which I find interesting because I assumed that I would have increased difficulty once I arrived.
So I'm very curious about your study methods. Which ones do you use for subjects and what is the most effective one?
So oftentimes when it comes to studying, for example, I have an exam tomorrow that I'm studying for, it really depends on the subject. In terms of mathematics, I ensure that I have a list of problems for me to go through. So after I look at all of my notes, I end up going through and practicing many different types of things, oftentimes for a few hours, starting a week beforehand. I do a similar thing for sciences, and I end up for humanities or really any tests that would revolve around humanities subjects. I would make myself flashcards or a Quizlet, for example. And I would use that and study it thoroughly, and then I would find resources that would allow me to practice these kind of questions that I would experience on the test and look over old notes and experiences and I would rewrite them. And I find that that is the most useful study method, especially if you do this multiple times, multiple days beforehand each day.
Thank you, Safiya, for this interview. It was really nice getting to know you. It was really nice meeting you. We enjoyed learning about your experiences in foreign countries. I hope to speak to you soon again. It was really fun. Thanks.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me.